I'm Phyllis Jackson. Thanks for joining us for Stay at Home Connect.
If you were out protesting last night, you probably need to go get a COVID test this week because there's still a pandemic in America that's killing Black and brown people at higher numbers.
Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms sharing concerns about the potential for new COVID-19 cases. She echoes the voices of medical professionals who are also worried about an increase in coronavirus due to protests. Demonstrations were sparked by the death of George Floyd, who was killed while under police custody in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Doctors are strongly encouraging protesters to wear face masks to protect themselves and those with whom they will come in contact, as large assemblies like demonstrations make social distancing difficult, if not impossible. A small Northwestern University study finds that COVID-19 may attack the placentas of pregnant women. 16 women were studied. One suffered a miscarriage. The remaining 15 delivered healthy babies, but 12 were diagnosed with malperfusion, a condition that limits blood flow between the mother and fetus. 6 had placental blood clots. I spoke with pathologist and lead author of the study, Dr. Jeffrey Goldstein.
One, we think our maternal outcomes are pretty good. Two, in women that have more severe coronavirus disease or have other comorbidities or problems with their pregnancy, we don't know, we can't really say what that looks like.
Dr. Goldstein says women need closer monitoring. A larger study will be launched to look at pregnant women with underlying conditions. Atlanta City Council member Amir Faroqi surveying damages to several businesses in District 2 following recent protests.
That's going to do it for Stay at Home Connect. Have a safe evening.
Can one girl in a small town, an architect in a major city, and a suburban high school coach shape the future of the United States? Yes, they can. Because every 10 years, the census gives us that power. You can shape your future by responding to the 2020 census. Where do we need new roads to make our lives easier? Where will new school programs help our children thrive? Where could a new health clinic benefit neighborhoods? The 2020 census will inform these decisions and shape how billions of dollars will be distributed to communities like yours each year. And in 2020, you can respond to the census online, by phone, or by mail. It's easy, safe, and important. Make sure you and everyone you know is counted. Now is the time for you to get involved. Your community needs you. Together, we can educate and excite, inspire and make sure every voice is heard. Together, we can shape our future.
Okay, we'll get started in 10, 9, 8, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, it is now 3:30. This is Felicia Moore, President of the Atlanta City Council, and we are here for an update from our mayor. Mr. Clerk, are you on the line? And if so, would you give the roll call?
Yes. President Felicia A. Moore.
Present.
Council members, Post 1 at large, Michael Julian Bond. Post 2 at large, Matt Westmoreland. Post 3 at large, Andre Dickens. Present. Council District 1, Carla Smith.
Here.
Council District 2, Amir Faroki. Council District 3, Antonio Brown. Council District 4, Cleta Winslow. Council District 5, Madeline Mosby Archibald.
Here.
Council District 6, Jennifer N. Hyde.
Here.
Council District 7, Howard Shook. Aye. Council District 8, J.P. Massakai. Council District 9, Dustin Hillett. Here. Council District 10, Andrea L. Boone.
Present.
Council District 11, Marcy Collier Overstreet.
Present.
Council District 12, Joyce M. Shepherd.
Present.
Quorum present, Madam President.
Councilman Westmoreland's here as well.
Duly noted. Madam President. Mayor Bottoms, I'm not certain if you're on the line.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I'm sorry, I was talking to you and I was on mute. I will turn it now over to the mayor.
All right, Madam President, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you. We're ready for you. Okay. And again, have any other members joined us since the roll call?
All right.
Okay, you're ready. We're ready for you, Madam Mayor. Go ahead.
My apologies. I'm actually in the Joint Operations Center, joined by Chief Bryant, who's leading and coordinating our public safety efforts from here, and our Police Chief Erica Shields and our Atlanta Fire Rescue Chief Randall Slaughter should also be on this call. So I will begin my update, and then I will toss to them for additional updates. Thank you for your time today to provide the updates on our pressing issues facing our city. As always, I hope that you and your families remain healthy, safe, and well during this time. I know that we have primarily focused our updates on COVID-19, but obviously there has been a shift on our streets and in our city. And so I'll share additional information related to our public safety update. We know in response to the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so many others, there have been protests that are happening across the nation and also right here in Atlanta. We have seen much of what has played out on television, and I know that many members of council and the public were gathered today to participate in the peaceful protest. As you all know, Atlanta is home to the civil rights movement and the birthplace of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., so we are no stranger to peaceful protests. But on Friday, we saw something in this city that we have not seen in quite some time, and that was what began as peaceful protests turned violent, including looting on the streets, attacks on many of the police officers, etc. In response to that, we issued a curfew in the city of Atlanta beginning on Saturday at 9 p.m. On Saturday, one of our officers, Maximilian Brewer, was severely injured by the driver of an ATV during the evening hours of Saturday. He is recovering in the ICU at Grady Hospital, and our prayers continue to be with he and his family during this time. We've also seen what's played out on the television regarding the misconduct of some of our officers during an arrest. And as I'm sure that you all are aware, 2 officers have been terminated as a result of that. We are continuing to review additional information, and we'll be making decisions and announcements regarding the other officers accordingly. There have been arrest warrants issued by the District Attorney Paul Howard. As you all know, he is an independently elected district attorney and has chosen to go forward with criminal charges against the officers. On Friday night, I also, in coordination with the state, made the request that additional support be sent into the city, because it became abundantly clear that our officers were having a very challenging time managing what was happening in our city on Friday. Because of that, the National Guard has been in our city since Friday and will continue their presence at least for the foreseeable future. We are also continuing to work very closely with the state and other agencies. It's my understanding from Chief Shields that when the announcement was made about the arrest of the officers, that some of our partner agencies that had been providing assistance in the JOC made the decision to withdraw their officers, but they remain ready to respond in whatever way needed to assist us. But also, I've been told that some of these withdrawals were because of the need for them to provide support in their own respective jurisdictions. So we continue to coordinate in the JOC and also with the state on our operations and the deployment of resources. We all know that there are many voices throughout our country who are calling for change. That's why this morning I signed an order convening an advisory council to include community members, organizers, and stakeholders to examine our use of force policies and procedures. This is in direct response to a challenge issued by President Obama on yesterday. This advisory council will make recommendations on changes needed to ensure that our policies have meaningful protections to create a safer and stronger city. Immediate recommendations will be presented within 14 days. And a more comprehensive report will be presented no later than 45 days following the receipt of community input. It's essential that we support and bring our city together in the coming days, weeks, and months. Many of the small businesses that fuel the economic engine of our local economy sustained damage over the past weekend, and we are committed to helping them recover. That's why we announced the creation of the City of Atlanta Recovery Fund under ATL Strong. This recovery fund will provide grants to businesses and organizations that have been adversely impacted to help them address physical damages and other losses. Invest Atlanta will administer the recovery fund, and information can be found on atlstrong.org. Our business leaders have also reached out to us to see how they can help, and I continue to be grateful and thank them for their engagement. I also want to share my support for the Atlanta Police Foundation and the Atlanta Fire Rescue Foundation. They are both raising funds to help repair and replace vehicles that have been damaged during the protests, some of which we saw in real time on television on Friday. Again, reminding everyone that we are still in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic. We are urging all who have participated in large gatherings to please get tested because, as we know, there's been very little social distancing in our city over the past week, and we've witnessed many people not wearing masks. We have provided a list of testing sites that we have disseminated via social media, as well as on our ATL Strong platform. As it relates to COVID-19, the state is releasing COVID cases updates once a day now. As of 3 p.m., we had in the state of Georgia 48,894 cases with 2,123 deaths. New cases are up 10.1% from the prior week and deaths up 11.3%. There are currently 27 City of Atlanta employees who've tested positive for COVID-19. The Tesper Avenue Solid Waste Facility is temporarily closed due to an employee testing positive earlier this week. This facility has been cleaned and employees are scheduled to be back at work on Monday, June 8th. In accordance with our protocol, all employees were instructed to self-quarantine, self-monitor for symptoms, and were encouraged to get tested. The department provided the employees a list of testing sites, and it's my understanding this action was taken based upon this employee's interaction with other employees throughout the facility, and so we will hopefully have them all back healthy on June 8th. Also, a reminder, we are in phase 2 of our reopening. Phase 2 does not include the opening of City Hall and other city government facilities at this time, but it does allow for small gatherings of 10 or fewer with social distancing, which of course has not happened over the past week. The opening of some recreation facilities and parks, and strong recommendations to continue to follow CDC guidelines. And you can track the city's reopening dashboard on the ATL Strong website. The dashboard will be updated bi-weekly on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the key metric in determining when we'll move to phase 3 will be the state's reporting of contact tracing. In accordance with the city's 5-phase reopening plan, the Department of Parks and Recreation is preparing for next steps while continuing to closely monitor updates as we hopefully move closer to phase 3. Continuing in phase 2, Parks and Recreation plans for the following amenity openings, most likely to occur in mid-June. The virtual summer camp, golf at the City of Atlanta golf courses will be open for limited play. Single match play games will be permitted on our tennis courts, and our aquatic centers, our indoor aquatic centers will be open for lap swim only. And additional protocols and guidelines will be released once definitive dates can be announced. I want to remind everyone that the curfew remains in effect. This weekend, beginning on Friday, the curfew will be at 8 p.m. We'll continue through Saturday and Sunday, ending each day at sunrise, and then we will review where we are at the end of the weekend, and we'll make additional announcements accordingly. People are not subject to the curfew if they are seeking medical attention, or first responders who are traveling to and from work, and those experiencing homelessness. If anyone has questions about the curfew, we encourage them to call 311 or, excuse me, at ATL on social media for more information. And before I move to Chief Bryant, Chief Shields, and Chief Slaughter, I just again want to thank you for your partnership and leadership. This has been an extremely trying time in the history of our city, already with COVID-19, and then on top of what we are witnessing across this country. But in so many ways, what's old is new. I believe in the same way that the civil rights movement really became a model for the nation and for the world, I believe that there is an opportunity for Atlanta to continue to lead and be representative of what change can and should look like in this country. And I look forward to us continuing to work together to make that happen. With that, I'll toss it to Chief Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Council. We are now in our 7th day of events. The initial event started off on Friday evening, where we were able to see how things unfolded. On Saturday, we implemented a full job let me go back to Friday. On Friday, we had responses from metro areas as well as some of our state partners, Georgia State Patrol. On Saturday, we implemented a full job, bringing in all of our metro partners and the National Guard, which was initiated by Chief Shields and the mayor. What we recognized is our crowds were continuously volatile and very aggressive toward the law enforcement as well as some of the structures throughout the city. We were able to deploy the National Guard and other law enforcement partners throughout to ensure that we were protecting the infrastructure as well as some of our larger commercial areas. We continued to see a level of violence throughout that day, with smaller groups breaking off and continuing to be violent throughout the night. But between Friday and Saturday, we were able to make a number of arrests and quell some of those issues. On Sunday, and then the mayor initiated a curfew that actually did a wonderful job of allowing us to separate peaceful protesters from those that wanted to commit acts beyond the peaceful protest. As we rolled into Sunday, we continued to see that level of violence, but not as bad as we had seen the days previously. The crowd continued to be aggressive. We were able to make sure that the crowds did not get as large as they had previously were because of the resources that we had. But as you all may have known, as we roll into Monday, those resources were diminished. Some so City of Atlanta as well as the National Guard continue to be upfront with our partners from the Georgia State Patrol. The crowd continued to show us a level of violence, but not as much, again, for decreasing or diminishing from the previous days before. Our resources were primarily in the downtown space, allowing us to make sure that we could monitor the crowds differently as they continue to march and be peaceful. As the curfew kicks in at about 9 o'clock, we continue to see the bad actors continue to be aggressive. On Monday night, we recognized that they were attempting to pull things from a construction site and block the street. Our resources with Atlanta Fire and the National Guard was able to make sure that we didn't see any large fires going forward, and the police responded appropriately. On Tuesday, we saw that the crowds began to march more. They became less aggressive and very much more peaceful, with small pockets continuing throughout the night. On Wednesday, we saw a very large crowd grow very rapidly in the CLP space, but also in Piedmont Park. Those two groups continued to move throughout the city. We monitored them. They remained peaceful up until the end of the night, where once again a very small group became volatile, but was very manageable. Over the period of time, the city of Atlanta, the number of people that have gone into the city jail is 417. The number to go into Fulton County Jail is 115 at their last count. Most people have received bonds that have come into the city jail and then had a 24-hour turnaround and being processed out of the jail. And that's all for me at this time. And I forward to Chief Shields.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and thank you, Council. So many of you have reached out and offered support to the department in a number of ways, and that is truly appreciated during this time. The mayor recapped what unfolded. Chief Bryant did as well as the past. The only thing I'll add as far as what we've been through is that what we saw Friday night was a whole new element of extremism that we've not seen before. The throwing of the bricks, the Molotov cocktails, the throwing knives at officers, and they're very highly organized. And so it's put us in a space that is unfamiliar, and this is across the country, and I talked to other chiefs. The methodology of the attackers is similar. They're obviously working from a playbook, and each city is being impacted similarly. The difficulty is the intelligence on what we're facing is not out there. The FBI and the GBI and with APD, but more so this effort will largely nationally be led by the FBI, are really bending over backwards to try to glean some intelligence so we can have some idea of what's before us so that we can prepare appropriately. What have we seen that's kind of that we need to balance through at this point as we look forward? We have our protesters who, of course, are lawful. It's what we're accustomed to. And what we need them to understand, and I think it's getting a little better, is when the curfew sets in, one of the things we've struggled with is they don't understand why they are being forced to leave. But what we need to continue to message to them, and I say we because many of you have communication with them, is the curfew is across the board. And until we can navigate out of the space where these extremisms are assaulting us, we just are going to have to embrace the curfew. And we just need them to know that to please leave. That if the curfew's at 9, at 8:30, start rolling up and packing out. We do not utilize tear gas unless there are acts of violence towards us. So, again, if we could just have your reinforcement as you talk to these community activists would be huge. I spoke with today the State Patrol, National Guard, and the one thing that they're wrestling with is there are several things popping up in the state. And so they recognize that this weekend they're going to have to place a contingent of individuals of National Guard in Athens, Georgia. So this is where the intelligence would be so useful because we could have a better idea of what we're facing. Right now, when you don't have the intelligence, you just have to position people so you can respond to anywhere in the city. And that dilutes our numbers significantly. So I'm working with them to try to see how we can minimally impact the city of Atlanta while also recognizing that they have the state to care for. But that is on the radar. In terms of the arrests, what I think is notable is that although we've had arrested around 500, a little over 500 people, what is notable is that really only 35% of them are local. And so if you even cap that at 50% to include the ones you bring in from Metro Atlanta, we are still dealing with a high number of individuals that we are not accustomed to seeing. And so I think I probably wouldn't get caught up so much on whether they're coming out of state. Out of state currently is about 12%. I think that what needs to be recognized is that there is people are communicating electronically, and we are drawing in people from surrounding areas of the state. So it'll be very interesting eventually when we get our arms around this to see who all of the actors were and what their role is. I can't end without saying the fire department has been phenomenal. What we put them into and what they stepped right up Friday night was they shouldn't have to have. The fires were not just fires; they were in highly dangerous places, and they went with us the whole way. And I can't say enough about them. And then the last thing that I'll touch on is obviously the arrests and the firings of the officers really have hit morale hard. And in large part, the issue is people can't step back and process any of this. it's relentless. You go home, you sleep for a few hours, and you come back. And so there's no downtime. There's no time to disengage. And so we are working through that. And all I would like to say is the arrest may have been appropriate. I don't know at some point. But at the end of the day, our department has 17 cases, use of force cases dating back to 2015, sitting in the DA's office. And the officers know this. And that lends itself to how then did you come to this conclusion in 48 hours and under 48 hours. But we also recognize where we failed those students. And we're open to corrective action, whatever. I hear the task force is going to be weighing in on some stuff. We get it. We messed up. But I also think it's important to understand why the officers have such difficulty with the decision on the arrest, to just try to put it in some context. And based on that, that's all I have. And if there's any particular questions, as always, I'm here to answer them. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, any other comments? And I have members that want to ask questions.
No, I want to toss it to Chief Slaughter for an update.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And good afternoon, Madam President and other distinguished members of Council. As it relates to fire and EMS, we are extremely well. I met with my entire leadership team this morning, and I continue to be extremely proud of the work and resilience of the firefighters, but not just the firefighters, but the civilian personnel as well. I just came to realize this morning that so many of them have never experienced anything such as what we're dealing with in the city at this time. We have a very young department. Things have been relatively calm since last Friday. Fortunately, in anticipation of the increased activity, we had also requested mutual aid support from the Georgia Mutual Aid Group. So on last Friday, when we got hit really hard, we had mutual aid support from 6 municipalities. We did have damage to 8 fire apparatus, mainly bricks versus windshield. So we also had damage to 1 mutual aid vehicle from Sandy Springs, and fortunately we had no firefighter injuries. Since Friday, we've had 6 structure fires, 3 of which we believe were directly connected to the protest. We've had a single-digit number of EMS calls related to the protest, and we also had a body recovery from the Peachtree Battle Creek, which we believe is totally unrelated to the protest. Since Friday, we have aggressively worked to fight large fires in this environment. We continue to review and update our policies and procedures relative to response during civil unrest. We formulated a plan for all of those facilities that meet the federal guidelines for critical infrastructure, as well as our historic sites in our city. However, in deference to the safety and protection of our firefighters, I will not go into great detail on this public line or in this format. All in all, we're in a good place. We will continue to support the request from the HB command on the ground, as well as continue to operate in a high state of readiness. And with that, that completes my report.
Okay, Madam Mayor, did you have anything else, or should I go to the lineup?
No, you can go to the lineup.
Okay. We'll start with Councilmember Dickens, followed by Councilmember Shook.
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Mayor, for the update, and thank you for your leadership. I know if I'm tired, I know you are super tired with working day and night on all this stuff from coronavirus to now with the protests. And I've said this before, you know, you dealt with patience and calm during the cyber attack, during COVID-19, and now this. So, you know, I just appreciate your leadership and how you keep your head on you and stay calm. And also to Chief Shields and Slaughter and everybody that's in our police and fire. You guys are doing a great job. I appreciate you for. I mean, I've been out there. I've been down there, and I see the faces of these guys. They're working hard. So give them our best as they continue to work through all of this. Madam Mayor, my question is: have the current set of protesters made any demands? So I had two questions. Have they made any demands, and have they met with you, or you met with them to talk about like what is it now that will kind of make sure that we have a negotiation?
Thank you, Council Member. The short answer is no, but we are in the process of organizing a meeting. As you can imagine, it's been difficult to identify who exactly the leaders and appropriate representatives would be to convene a small meeting. So we're in the process of doing that, and hopefully we'll have that meeting either tomorrow or Saturday, but we're working on that in real time. We've not received any formalized response or demand, but part of what I've been reminded of is something that Councilmember Bond has often reminded us of, and that's the legacy of the student movement in Atlanta. And as I know you are aware, and I was just reading it again this morning, there was an appeal for human rights created by Rosalind Pope, Marianne Smith, and so many others from the Atlanta University Center that specifically delineated what their grievances were and what their expectation was to have those grievances addressed. And so I think it will be prudent upon us as more mature leaders in this city to help in as best we can create some framework and direction to help many of our younger leaders articulate exactly what it is. Obviously, the most important is not seeing another man or woman killed on our streets. And beyond that, what it is that we can do beyond what we are already doing as a city to make sure that we are living up to our calling as well. So we will keep you updated on that, and hopefully we'll have a formal gathering with some of the representatives in the next several days. Okay.
Yeah. So. And that kind of one of those things goes to my second question, because you're right. There are different groups out there, a couple of in-town groups, and then there's some national groups. From what I've observed and from the messaging I've received and calls I've had, so it is difficult to get one uniform voice, so you have one letter, one set of demands to meet or what have you. Some of the things that they've mentioned, we actually have, like a Citizens Review Board. I think they wanted some more diversity, younger people, et cetera, on the Atlanta Citizens Review Board. Some of the stuff was related to ACDC, the city jail, and you've been in leadership on, setting the standard for making changes there. I think they got a timing issue with it, but I think we're all in the same direction. They have some Fulton County stuff that I hear them saying, which, of course, that leadership will have to deal with. So by and large, I would say a considerable number of the things they have mentioned, we're already there or near there. One of the things that I've heard was, they were calling for the curfew to end and the military to go home. So I know in Seattle they just did that. What are your thoughts on that? As the protests have gotten more peaceful, what is the pathway towards, what are the signals that we're looking at to make a determination about curfew over the weekend?
Well, let me just be clear. What we have on our streets are the National Guard, which is, we consider that different in terms of the military that you're seeing, I think, in Washington, D.C. Actually, I don't know if that's the National Guard in Washington, D.C. or not, so I don't want to misspeak on that. But that being said, it was necessary on Friday that we get support from the National Guard, and as of now, we still deem it necessary, but it's not my wish to have them present in our city a day or minute or second longer than they should be, then we need them here. And that same goes for the curfew. So if you recall with the curfew, we were announcing it day by day, but what we were getting was feedback from businesses asking us if we could project ahead because it was making it difficult for them to give instructions to the employees and also make determinations on when they would close their businesses. That's why the decision was made to extend it through the weekend. But immediately after we assessed the tone and the tenor of the weekend, we'll make a decision based on the curfew then. And again, it is not my desire to have a curfew in the city of Atlanta in any form or fashion, but it is necessary until things stabilize a bit.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mayor. That's the end of my questions, Madam President.
Okay, and before we go to Mr. Shook, would everyone else make sure that your phone is on mute? I'm hearing some feedback. Please mute your phone. Mr. Shook.
Yeah, thank you. The chief, in her habitually straightforward manner, has talked about her reaction to the APD arrest warrants. And so, ma'am, my question simply is, what were your reactions to that? Thank you.
Yeah, so before us on Sunday, council member, I received a copy of that video sometime during the night, Saturday night. T.I. actually sent it to me, and then other people sent it to me, including my son. So we came in on Sunday at the JLC and spent about 4 hours looking at what we then thought were all of the body cam videos. We now realize there were some additional ones. It became immediately clear with the young lady that the officer should be terminated. Spent a little more time on the video surrounding the young man and made the determination to fire the other officers. When Chief Shields and I, Chief Bryan and others sat in the room looking at those videos, not once did I even think about criminal charges, and that was not a discussion that came up. Sometime, I believe on Monday, Chief Shields relayed to me that Paul Howard had asked for some information related to the body cam video, which we, of course, provided to him. Chief Shields can speak to whatever additional conversations she had, if you wish to have more information on that. But on Tuesday morning, around 9 o'clock, I received a call from Paul Howard saying that he was going forward with arrest warrants and that he was going to make those arrests at 11 o'clock. And quite frankly, what I did ask the question specifically related to the case of Jimmy Atchison, because that investigation, the shooting of an unarmed young man, that case has been open for quite some time, and it's been with the district attorney's office. And I did ask the question, why the expediency on this, and we haven't gotten results on cases like Jimmy Atchison. And, you know, Paul Howard can, you know, offer his reasoning and rationale for going forward with the arrest in the way that he did. But right before us, for my determination and our purposes, was a termination, a discussion around termination, and, you know, the decision to move forward with the arrest of those officers was that of the district attorney.
All right. Now, well, thank you for that. I can read in between all those lines. I'm just not sure how many members of the public can. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Farokhi, Mr. Hillis.
Thank you, Madam President. Just three questions, and they may be better answered by the mayor or the police chief. I defer to them as to who's best placed to answer them. But the first one I think is best placed to the mayor. Madam Mayor, you talked a little bit about your desire to see a curfew lifted and the thinking behind extending it a few days in advance, which makes sense. Could you push a little bit further? Would you be willing to talk a little bit about some of the specific factors and variables you're looking at with respect to lifting it?
Yeah, you know, right now there's so many unknowns for us, and this has not been my decision alone. This has been in consultation with Chief Shields and her leadership team, and also with Chief Bryan as he's leading our coordination with our other public safety entities. But essentially, we don't know what we're facing right now, and even after Friday, and all of my days are running together. I want to say it was Monday. We still had people attempting to set fires in the street from a construction site. So everything is so fluid right now. That's the reason, because things haven't settled down to give us a comfort level yet to lift the curfew, but as soon as we're able to lift it, we will. And I can say, even with the curfew that we have announced throughout the weekend, if we have a couple of peaceful nights, you know, we can always pull the curfew back. But we wanted to give our businesses and our residents an opportunity to plan for the curfew, but we can always rescind the curfew if it appears that circumstances warrant that.
Or discussion around potentially limiting the curfew to a specific geographic area. I know in Los Angeles, they've limited it to a certain section of the city. And it may or may not work here. I'm just kind of curious if that was part of the thought process at all.
I have given some personal thought to that, but my personal concern was that we would then drive the protesters into other areas of the city. And certainly with them at least being in the downtown area, I think the deployment of resources are a bit less challenging.
Thank you. And Chief Fields, can you talk a little bit about the division of labor between APD and the supporting law enforcement agencies? I get sporadic complaints about all, but specifically about some of the non-APD agencies that are assisting. And I'm just curious if you could shed a little bit of light without betraying tactical strategy as to kind of what role GSP is playing, what role National Guard's been playing, any of our metropolitan agencies that are helping.
Yep. I'll ask Chief Bryan. Well, okay, Chief Shields and yes. Chief Bryan can address that.
Yes, just so we're clear, I'm in communication with them. And so it's been something that from the onset we've had to work through, knowing that we have a different approach. And so what we have done is the role of the National Guard has been largely to reinforce us, and we hold the front line. The role of the State Patrol has been to reinforce us and also the interstate. What I will say is where we are not the primary is at the state capitol and the governor's mansion. And in speaking with GSP and the National Guard this morning, that was one of our key topics of discussion as we go into the weekend, and that is, how are we going to do this? Because the National Guard and GSP do not want to be point, and I don't think we want them to either. And we're the ones that understand the culture of the protest and understand the tolerance and how to move it through. So they are really in a support role, and we're all aligned on that. And so I think by and large, especially the last few nights, we've actually gotten into a routine, as much as you can have a routine with the National Guard in your city. But I think that there is much greater communication. And also we have, where there are National Guard troops, we also have assigned to that APD personnel. So there's the constant communication. We have an APD commander over in the Georgia State Patrol National Guard headquarters. So I think it's been really successful given what we're being confronted with.
Finer point on my question. I mean, I will tell you the complaints I get most are about GSD. And, you know, there are times when there's person-to-person interaction and just inevitably based on how things go. And a lot of this is just kind of different cultural and emotional IQ that they have interfacing with our residents and APD has interfacing with our residents. My hope would be we can minimize those interactions, which have not always been pleasant for some folks. But I know that we're stretched thin and we need their assistance. But I just want to make that point and appreciate you explaining the role everyone's playing.
I think that I understand that, and we all want to get into a space where APD can manage it. But the reality of it is we are not in a position to be questioning, you know, the civility of the, you know, their demeanor at this point. We're trying to get control of a really volatile situation, and you know, so the sooner that we can get a handle on it, the sooner that we can just go back to APD managing the city. I think it's the goal we all share, and I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to the state, GSP in particular, for the support they've provided us. We need it, and I hope that is a message that we're relaying to the state as well.
You done, Mr. Farooqui? Okay, so let's go to Mr. Hillis, Mr. Bond after him.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for this update, and also thank you to the chiefs. First, wanted to ask kind of the broader question. As I know we certainly have the hot spots downtown that are getting a lot of police attention, and rightfully so. But I have heard of a few incidents further out in the city. One that I received a specific letter about today. So my general question is, what are we doing to ensure that we're still giving a good presence out in the zones and hitting hot spots? The letter that myself and Major Collier received today notated apparently that the Family Dollar on Hollowell Parkway has been a subject of what they're calling looting. I kind of doubt that it's connected to the protesters in any way. This is probably just opportunistic theft is what it is. But the lady accounted that, you know, oh no, the manager said, oh no, they're looting again. They've been looting all day. And then one of the guys said to her, lady, you don't know me. I'm packing. You need to shut up. So Major Collier did have a very good response to this, and he's, you know, assigned it to an investigator, and they're going to try to see if they have video to capture these 6 criminals. But again, just addressing my general question of what are we doing? I know I'm sure the zones have stretched the resources with all the hot spots downtown, but what's the status out in the zones and FOD?
Actually, Councilman, it's they're not as stretched as thin as you think. So what we do is we take all of day watch and all of morning watch, and they go on 12-hour shifts. So you actually potentially have more staffing in the zones than you normally do. And what I will say is the tactical teams, yes, they may be pulled to hit some of the other areas where there are protesters, but from strictly a staffing standpoint, you probably have more people. The zones actually have been managing quite well. We have had 2 incidents of burglaries, which people are labeling looting. It's similar to after, you know, whenever there's a bomb, anytime after that, a package, it's a bomb. You're going to have an uptick in the number of 911 calls thinking it's looting, whereas I think it's just criminal behavior that we would have regardless. But the zones are not understaffed, and I think that we just need to squash that there. They probably have higher staffing. They do have higher staffing levels than they do traditionally.
Okay, thank you for that. And again, I just wanted to reiterate that Major Collier did provide a very quick response and is addressing it. And thank you for answering my questions and concerns.
So next is Mr. Bond, followed by Ms. Overstreet, and she has the last question. Mr.
Thank
Bond.
you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. I want to say first, thank you, Mayor, for your efforts over this last week, and of course, the continuing efforts on COVID-19. And I want to give high compliments to Chief Shields, Chief Slaughters, and Interim Chief Bryant for the work that they're doing to keep our city safe, and also for the men and women of our various departments who are not only putting themselves on the line during the activities, but of course there's still a pandemic going on and they're still at risk when they're out in the face of the public. Some of my questions have been answered, but I will say going forward, particularly as we head towards the presidential election, I don't think that a lot of our demonstration activities will cease. And as things center around our municipal jail facility, the sheriff is not obligated to take our municipal charges. And so if we want to continue in the vein of making sure that we keep our arrestees decriminalized, we may have to have some conversations with them. I don't know what the timeline is on wrapping down the operations there, but it's a nuanced issue if we're going to continue to have people demonstrating and then subsequently being arrested for those demonstrations. But my question going forward, I know that there are several groups, and I have had some limited conversations with persons who are connected to a couple of them. The big difference between the student movement and the SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Movement, that's 60 years old this year in this city, is that they were highly organized and had mentors with them to kind of guide them in what they were doing. And of course, this seems to be a hodgepodge of organizations that have like and distinct issues. When you have these meetings, when you get them set up, can you make sure that there is representation from the city council present in those negotiations? Because from the outside, even though the administration leads, and we know that it is responsible for negotiations, people on the outside just see, quote unquote, the city, and they hold us accountable for what the administration does as well.
Thank you for that request, Councilmember Bond. I don't know as of yet what the parameters and the inclusion will be in the first meeting, but certainly keeping top of mind that City Council wants to have a role and a presence there. But we are also mindful that we are still in the midst of COVID-19, so we're going to be very thoughtful about how many people are invited at least to the first meeting. For me personally, this really will be a listening session, not an action-oriented session. This is for me to hear directly, at least from the ones that we can identify as leadership in it. I'm sure it won't be inclusive of all. But even driving in today, I had a very good conversation with Ambassador Young. And the question was posed to me earlier this week, who is the leader of this movement, or who should it be? And it just made me begin to think about our history of civil rights and legacy of civil rights. And that was a question I had never contemplated as to how Dr. King became the designated leader of the civil rights movement. And then, of course, in Ambassador Young's way, he, took me through a very quick history lesson, which I'm sure Councilmember Bond, you are well aware of.
Yeah.
And how Dr. King was pulled from the back making copies, I believe, he was, and elected the leader of this movement that at that time was being organized by women in Alabama. And so we will see who the leader of this movement, what leader emerges in this movement. But as of now, we are where we are. And there's so many voices and so much to be heard, and we're going to work in the best way we can to make sure that we are able to hear from those voices, but obviously being respectful of where we are in time, and that is still in the midst of COVID-19.
Oh, thank you. And because of
COVID, I was just going to say we only have and I'm going to ask the mayor if she can give us a few more minutes, because we do have 3 other members that have to be very brief, because we only have about 4 more minutes in the call.
No, I understand that, and I waited patiently behind others, and I plan to be brief as well. Madam Mayor, given that it is COVID-19, has there been any coordination at all as to the distribution of masks, or even setting up testing areas adjacent to some of these demonstrations? Because one of the things that has disturbed me, I've lost a family member to COVID-19, buried on my birthday. Has there been any effort to try to get some of these supplies out to some of these demonstrators or these crowds?
I know that we've had some discussions on masks, and we've been awaiting an order of masks to distribute to the public. We've not received that yet. My understanding, the airport just received some masks to distribute to passengers, but I believe we are still awaiting our city order. But we have been pushing out via social media and encouraging people who have participated in the mass gatherings and demonstrations over the last week, encouraging them to get tested and providing information on where our testing sites are throughout the city. My understanding, the Mercedes-Benz site has been closed due to the marches and the protests, but that the other sites remain open at this time.
Okay, thank you. I'll redirect my other questions. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Overstreet, Ms. Shepherd, and Ms. Boone.
Okay, thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be brief, but I am getting a lot of calls about, a whole lot of calls about a lot of things, of course, but something that we need a little more information about is how businesses are expected to enter back into normalcy. So can you just spend just another moment talking about where we are as a city, which phase we're in, when we expect to transition to the next phase as far as return to normalcy? And I will let you know that because of all of the protests and you know, the fact that everyone is not able to social distance while we're protesting, which, you know, it's obvious why we're having to do what we're having to do. It really is confusing to a lot of people, to no fault of either of us, of course. But like, I'm mindful of it because I can't go out that often, even with a mask, because my mother is, you know, battling cancer, and I'm also, you know, I have to stay well for her. So I'm wondering, can you speak about where we are in the phase? And people are concerned about their businesses. They don't want to be in trouble with the curfew. You touched on it slightly, but they're asking specific questions. Like if the curfew is at 9 and they still have people there because they closed at 8, but people are still there, how does that affect them? And they're wondering when can they begin again to get business licenses, which we do not have those specific dates, I'm sure, but I just want you to speak on it.
Yeah, so I'll just say, you know, I share the concerns you have, Councilmember Overstreet. You know, I have 4 kids at home with asthma, one with severe asthma, and so I've been very concerned about my interaction with the public for the same reasons in light of COVID-19.
That being said, we're in an extraordinary time right now, and in moments of grief and sorrow, people want to grieve together, and I think that's what you're seeing on our streets as well. So that being said, the governor's order supersedes anything that we have from the city of Atlanta. Businesses are free to open during this COVID phasing. What we have from the advisory committee were a set of recommendations that many businesses in Atlanta have chosen to follow. But as it relates to the curfew is citywide. And if people have businesses, then they need to close them early enough to allow their businesses to close and their employees to be off of the streets by 9 o'clock. That being said, by and large, I think it's very clear that the enforcement of the curfew has been centered around Centennial Olympic Park and the downtown area. If there's been enforcement in other areas of the city, I'm unaware of that or the need to enforce in other areas of the city. But as far as I know, for most purposes of the arrests and citations that have been written, I believe that's primarily been focused around the Centennial Olympic Park area.
Mm-hmm. And so we are in phase 2, correct, and headed to phase 3 soon?
We are in phase 2. I believe there's a monitoring of the numbers for 14 days, but before we can get to phase 3, a huge part of moving on to phase 3 was an assessment of where we were with contact tracing. We discussed that earlier today during our cabinet meeting, and I think we're still awaiting some updates from the state on the contact tracing.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your leadership. You are truly being battle tested, and thank you to Chief Shields and Chief Bryant and everyone that is really having to do the hard work and make these split decisions in a moment's time, and I appreciate all that everyone is doing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, if you can indulge, we have just 2 more questions, one by Ms. Shepherd, and the last is Ms. Boone. Ms. Shepherd?
Thank you, Mayor Bottoms. A couple questions or comments. I've been getting a lot of calls and responses and emails from folks in my district, and of course, I'm sure you have too across the city in terms of police reform. And of course, I know that's why you're looking at this commission or this task force that you're looking at. And I would love to be a part of it as a public safety officer. I'm getting calls from across everywhere. But my questions are, one of the things I'm also finding out when people are asking for me some of these questions or emailing me, even in my district, letting them know that there are things in place. For instance, people are saying, well, why don't we have a citizen review board? We do have a citizen review board. They're asking a lot of questions that are things that we already have in place. And so I'm not saying that we should not do better and that we need to go back and do a whole assessment of where we are. But people are making a lot of assumptions of things that are not true. And to that point, even in terms of training and retraining of our officers, I remember from Catherine Brown when we had this whole scenario, that's how we create the Citizen Review Board. And just even in terms of training, psychological training, a lot of different things that people are asking for. So I would like to ask, if possible, if you could even put out a list of things that we have been doing as a city for quite some time. And then, of course, again, talking about the fact that we're creating this task force, the things that are already happening, so we can dispel some of the myths of what we may not, so people assume we're not doing in the city of Atlanta. So just want to know if you have any comments to that. Thank you.
Yeah, this is something we've discussed, and we want to be very thoughtful about our messaging to the public, even, as we're looking at Los Angeles that has done some stuff around its police budget.
I shared with someone today that we've already done that with our corrections budget. So, we know that we are redirecting public safety personnel, or public safety dollars into more areas related to equity in our city. We know we have the Citizens Review Board, many of the pillars of the 21st Century Policing Plan are already in place in the city, but we just want to be very methodical in the same way we have sort of managed these other projects that we have going on in the city, that we can give a clear assessment of where we are and what's in progress, what's already been satisfied, and what more needs to be done. And the public messaging of that is going to be a huge part of that as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Boone is the last question.
Yes, quickly. Thank you, Madam President. Mayor Bottoms, thank you so much again for everything your administration is doing for the seniors all across this city. I wanted to bring attention to an event planned tomorrow, a positive event, I believe, called Protest to the Polls, that is scheduled to happen at the C.T. Martin Recreation Center tomorrow. The lines today stretched from the front door all the way up to the Allen Hill Apartments. Voting hours were upward 3 hours and more. Just trying to see if we can get any extra support out there tomorrow for this event. This is a residential area. And if we have any comments from Forrest Webb, our clerk, the county only had 4 processors. So we'd like to see if we could make some phone calls to get something accomplished so that folks will not have 3 to 4 hours tomorrow during this positive protest to the polls, I believe.
And Councilmember Boone, what is there APD support? What is the support?
What I think that we do need extra support, and I believe the hours are from 12 until the polls close, which is 7 p.m. So whatever support we can get, we're just not sure. I understand some celebrities will be attending, as well as some of our personalities from the radio station.
Okay, so we'll have someone give you a call, Councilmember, just so we can talk through more details and, of course, provide whatever support is needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, Madam Mayor, if I could add to those comments, this is Forrest Webb, Municipal Clerk. It was just brought to my attention the actual event itself by the elections chief in Fulton County, who was subsequently notified by the state elections office. The lines, as Ms. Boone indicated, they have been 2 to 3 hours long. And currently at this location, there are 2 Fulton County sheriffs that have been here from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I don't know what tomorrow may look like, but tomorrow's the last day of early voting. And subsequently, I would imagine that the numbers would be extremely high. Currently, there were approximately 600 individuals that had to go through the absentee balloting process, affidavit process rather, which is those individuals had not received their absentee ballot, so subsequently they've come to the polls here to vote, and that has caused significant delays, upwards of 10 to 15 minutes per voter, and that has to be verified with Fulton County. I don't want to sound the alarms, but as the activity has occurred downtown, and because this is a early voting location and there are individuals being fed at this facility as well, I do not know what the ultimate need may be, but I do believe that it is prudent to be prepared. I have, within the last 15, 20 minutes, sent a communication to Ms. Chubb and the COO Williams just to bring this to their attention. But again, I don't know what the actual impact will be. It is being promoted as something affirmative. However, I still don't know if it could possibly be infiltrated. Currently, I'm at the C.T. Martin location, and I have been here since 3 o'clock. And all of the voters have been extremely patient. However, I do not want things to be escalated or to have their opportunity to vote to be compromised. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, Madam Mayor, if you had any closing remarks, and we can do the roll call.
Now, I just, again, remain grateful for your leadership and your partnership and for all of the hard work and leadership that we're seeing on behalf of the men and women in the city of Atlanta. This week has been very emotional for so many of us. We are all experiencing a range of emotions, and then so many of our men and women then have to go out and be public facing on behalf of the city of Atlanta. So again, I just want to thank them, and also just part of our team who I don't think enough is our senior leadership team, from our COO Joshua Williams to my Chief of Staff Carmen Chubb and their respective teams and staff. Our communications department, I mean, we have been working around the clock, and I just get to be the face of it all, but there is an entire team that is working nonstop. Rashad Taylor, and I could, the list, Michael Smith, Lydia, I mean, I'm going to get in trouble for calling names. I'm going to stop calling names, but I just want you all to know that there's so many people working so very hard on behalf of our city and our residents, and I'm very proud to work alongside them, and I know that you all join me in being grateful for their commitment to our city as well.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks to all members. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at our city attorney, and I didn't call her name as well, so I want to just acknowledge the hard work. I mean, this truly has been a team effort, and people are on the ground doing the work from sun up to sunrise, sunset, sunrise. So, thank you, Madam President.
You're welcome. And thank you all members for joining. Mr. Clerk, if we can have the roll call, please.
Yes. President Moore.
Present.
Council members Bond. Here. Westmoreland. Here. Dickens. Here. Smith.
Here.
Baroki. Brown. Winslow. Archibald. Aye.
Here.
Shook.
Aye, thank you.
Matsakite. Hillis. Here. Boone.
Present.
Overstreet. Shepherd.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and everyone stay safe. The call is ended.